Good late afternoon. My name is Andreas C, and I am the chair of the National Advisory Board for the Berman Institute of Bioethics. I owe my being up here today largely to one man, my father, Bob Levy, a committed Baltimorean, a Johns Hopkins alum and trustee, and a Blue Jay booster. At family dinners, whenever I might venture a toast, he was quick to remark, "Make it brief." So today I'll do my best to sustain my filial allegiance. So welcome to the inaugural installation of the Andreas C. Dracopoulos Director of the Johns Hopkins Berman Institute of Bioethics. To my knowledge, this is a singular event, a moment in history that we hope will be repeated globally in other universities. The dedication of an endowed directorship at a bioethics institute. On a more personal note, I get to introduce two of my favorite people, a bioethicist and a philanthropist, who have combined forces to elevate the field of bioethics and the mission of Johns Hopkins University. I have been involved with the Berman Institute since its inception. In a couple of years, it's going to reach the age of majority, 21. But from an institutional time frame, it has grown from infancy to perhaps a juvenile stage. Although we hope it has a long, long life ahead, it has already had an impact felt around the world in the areas of science, clinical care, and public health. As our world shrinks and accelerates, we find ourselves faced more and more by confounding issues. Modern genomics confirms what ancient religion and philosophy teaches, that we are all more similar than otherwise, and like it or not, we are more interdependent than ever. We can take some comfort in the fact that the Institute wrestles with these issues in a rigorous, methodical way. And this endowed directorship preserves the mission in perpetuity. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize two who are like father figures for me. Morris Alford, the Berman Institute's first board chair, and Bud Meyerhoff, who served in that role for years until I was tapped to step in his rather large pair of shoes. Their contributions to Johns Hopkins and the Berman Institute cannot be overstated. President Ron Daniels has a vision of one Hopkins, in which within the university boundaries become so permeable that separate schools, divisions, institutes become so interactive that the potential synergy is realized. The Berman Institute is the poster child for this university-wide vision. We certainly would not be holding this celebration today without his personal commitment and leadership. Please join me in welcoming President Ron Daniels.
Zach, perfect. I think we executed that one very well, and just think of the family strife that has been avoided through your artful timing. Welcome to you all, and welcome, Zach. What a pleasure to be with so many of the university's trustees and academic leaders, colleagues, and friends to mark this significant moment for the Berman Institute for Bioethics, and indeed for Johns Hopkins. And I'm particularly delighted that Tom Bijumia Jur here today, Ruth's husband, and Zach is, as you saw, just-in-time delivery, and Karine and Martin, Ruth's daughter and son-in-law, will be here very shortly. But we're really pleased that you're all with us today. Moments like this give us license to pause. Something that colleagues at Berman rarely allow themselves to do, and to appreciate the extraordinary trajectory of this institute. Unique in size and scope, Berman now celebrates another first. As Alex said, it is the first institute of bioethics in the world to have an endowed director. And that is no small achievement. For making this gift possible, we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Andreas Dracopoulos. And of course, for her transformative leadership of the Berman Institute, I'm delighted to recognize that the Institute's founding director and now the Andreas C. Dracopoulos, Director of the Berman Institute of Bioethics, is of course Ruth Faden. Now it's safe to say that the Berman Institute would never have arrived at this moment without Ruth. We all know that to be the case. I understand though that the fate of the Berman Institute was at one point in doubt due to Ruth's unwavering commitment to homemade gefilte fish. Now this story may be apocryphal, but I like it enough, a lot, so I'm going to run with it. Whether it's true or not, that doesn't really matter, but I understand. Legend. Here's how I heard it from a colleague, who heard it from a colleague, who talked to someone at a deli who says this is absolutely true. But one spring, nearly 20 years ago, Al Sommer, who many of you know as the former dean of the Bloomberg School of Public Health, and Sylvia Eccleston-Ware, his head of development, were talking with the philanthropist Phoebe Berman. Sylvia and Al were suggesting to Phoebe that she consider focusing her philanthropy on bioethics. Thanks to Ruth Faden and several colleagues, Hopkins was already doing pioneering work in the field. And one day, when Al and Sylvia called Ruth and said, we've set up a meeting, we've got a great break, we've set up a meeting with Phoebe Berman tomorrow, and you've got to come. And Ruth, without missing a beat, said she couldn't. Passover was approaching, and this was the day that Ruth made gefilte fish. So, as you can imagine, this caused some consternation. No, Al and Sylvia said with increasing intensity and urgency, you don't understand. This is big. This is really big. She's interested in supporting the Institute. Still, however, Ruth hesitated, weighing as she does all challenging questions. So we go the gefilte fish or the defining gift for the Institute. Needless to say, Ruth found a solution that answered so many different needs. She stayed up all night to make the gefilte fish and dashed up to Baltimore to meet with Phoebe Berman. The meeting went well, and the rest, of course, is history. And of course, knowing Ruth, we can be confident that the gefilte fish was good as well. Now, when I heard this first tale, it surprised me that Ruth would hesitate. Surely, she knows what all good Jewish mothers know. You can get gefilte fish in a jar from the supermarket. It's not pretty, but it is available in situations of pressing urgency like this one. But suddenly, it made perfect sense. For Ruth, there is no cutting corners and no stinting on personal engagement in achieving the very best product. There is only her deep commitment to excellence and a desire to serve humanity with profound compassion, fierce intelligence, and meticulous work. Hence, the homemade gefilte fish. This commitment is reflected in her 40-year career at the vanguard of bioethics. Whether defining the paradigm of informed consent in her seminal book on the subject, co-authored with her husband Todd Beecham, or igniting new debate about the issue in the pages of the New England Journal of Medicine over 20 years later, Ruth has delved into our greatest challenges in human health. And in everything she has done, she has kept a keen focus on the people at the heart of these issues, arguing that justice and equity are the rights of all, not just a privileged few. And during her 15 years leading the Berman Institute, she has nurtured a world-renowned faculty who share her vision and together has set a standard for cross-disciplinary creativity in the field. And as Alex said, really have become the poster child for interdisciplinary activity within the university. Now, I'm fairly certain, Andreas, that you can't, in your life experience, ever say that you have stayed up all night making gefilte. But seeing him in action as a Hopkins trustee and watching his incomparable leadership of the Arcus Foundation, it's clear that he too refuses to offer anything less than his best in any context. And having heard him talk about the future we owe to our next generation, you understand you can't miss his profound humanity, decency, and compassion. You see it in his leadership of one of the world's leading philanthropic institutes, which has not only made direct investments to advance education, but also has invested in the arts and medical discovery around the world, and has used its philanthropy to ignite systemic change to benefit those most in need of assistance, of healing. You see it in his efforts to galvanize economic recovery in its native Greece, whether working directly with government leaders or gathering international experts to tackle the issue of youth unemployment for a generation hurt so badly by the recent economic crisis. And you hear it in the probing questions he asks our university leadership about everything from the safety of our campuses and the ways we're supporting our students to achieve their aspirations while they're here and in the many years to come. All of these issues are of great interest to Andreas. And on a personal level, I have been the beneficiary of Andreas's wide-ranging intelligence and his generosity of spirit. In countless conversations, during meetings and over shared meals, he has offered wise counsel and perspective on matters large and small, whether we are bonding over the power of great architecture or delving into the challenges facing global higher education. Of course, you see these qualities most clearly in Andreas' commitment to the Berman Institute. He understands intuitively the need to ask questions that are at the core of our humanity, and he recognizes the power of the Berman Institute and its people to help us grapple with the greatest moral and ethical challenges of our era, from conquering healthcare disparities to addressing global food scarcity to realizing the full promise of population health. Yet, I think his greatest gift to us is to set the bar ever higher, challenging us to infuse the principles of bioethics into all that we do so we can truly stand as the model of an engaged, principled, and humane university and medical system for the 21st century. Through his leadership, he is ensuring that we live up to our great and common aspiration. Andreas, for your extraordinary vision, your friendship, and your unstinting support of the Berman Institute, its new Dracopoulos Director, Ruth Faden, and all those who devote themselves to this important work, we are very, very grateful for what you have done. It's truly an extraordinary gift, and you have brought extraordinary leadership. Ruth, congratulations on this wonderful recognition of your pioneering research, your exceptional leadership, and your humanity. With all you have already accomplished, we look forward to celebrating all that's yet to come, and we know that there is so much more to come. With that, I'd like to invite Alex to return to the podium. But again, congratulations to you both.
So, now for the fun part. I have the duty and pleasure of introducing my dear friend and fellow board member, Andreas Dracopoulos. It was more than a decade ago that Andreas and I shared the train back to New York. And from that moment on, our friendship has only grown and deepened. It has been facilitated by fine wine and fine dining, not enough that we don't remember. I realize I'm about to embarrass him and make him uncomfortable. But I know our friendship can tolerate this betrayal. He wanted us to focus on the Institute and not on him. But I only wish I could honestly say, I'm sorry. But I'm not. It's the case. Andreas deserves this recognition. Andreas is a wonderful person who exhibits fascinating balances of competing traits. He combines hard-headed realism with soft-hearted sentimentalism, a strong-willed individualism with a committed communitarianism, a passionate aestheticism with a clear-eyed rationality, an interpersonal insightfulness and sensitivity with prescient objectivity, and a capacity to make tough executive decisions, and finally, his laughter, a blend of youthful, joyous exuberance and existential absurdist irony. In short, he is a complex, multifaceted, and fascinating individual. When I learned that I was to introduce Andreas, my first thought was a philosophic idea proffered by Aristotle, megalopsikos, the great-souled man. I wonder why my association was to Greek philosophy. Think about it. I knew a bit about Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics, and a little is all I know. That being said, I will not venture into depths, as I will quickly be over my head and will be underwater, way out of my purview. To give you some sense of what I wanted to convey, I will rely upon quotes from an authentic philosopher, Jacob Howland, and his article, Aristotle's Great-Souled Man. Quote, highest end of human life, happiness, is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue and excellence. Facing enormous risks in order to do the noblest deeds, his actions are few but great. Virtues such as courage, public spiritedness, generosity, honesty, decency, and politeness are but a few. A lover of the noble. Great-souled men are mostly worthy of honor because they are considered to be the community's greatest benefactors. He is distinguished by the passionate intensity of his aspirations to that which is highest and best. I know Andreas can't handle all of this praise, but it is deserved. I also know we shall have words over this, but it can't be any worse than our arguing over which is superior, Bordeaux or Burgundy wine. I leave it to you to decide which one of us prefers the Bordeaux over the Burgundy. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to present my dear friend, Andreas C.
I'm often asked why the Berman Institute of Bioethics and why Hopkins? Well, to begin with, over the last 20 plus years, family members and I have been the beneficiaries of extraordinary medical care at Hopkins. Because of my frequent visits to Hopkins, I had the opportunity to become good friends with former Hopkins President Bill Brody and with doctors Walter Stark, Patrick Walsh, Keith Lillemore. Then, 15 years ago, came Dr. Dan Finkelstein, who introduced me to Dr. Ruth Faden, the founding director of the Berman Institute of Bioethics, following up from a conversation we had about an experience of mine with bad hospital bedside manners, not at Hopkins, I have to stress. Then I joined the advisory board, and while on the train from New York to Baltimore, for my first meeting, I met Alex Levy, the chair of our advisory board, with whom, as you already heard, I have developed over the years a great personal friendship. The rest is history, and it's a good history indeed. Recently, I had the real pleasure of getting to know Ron Daniels, whose character, leadership, and vision made it very difficult for me to turn down his invitation to become a trustee of Johns Hopkins. I have been amazed by the commitment of present and past trustees, such as Bob Meyerhoff. I'm honored to have met and become friends with Maurice Offit, in whose veins Hopkins blood flows deep. So that's why Hopkins. Dr. Faden has spent her entire career passionately committed to dealing with ethical challenges in the biomedical science field and in women's health. Ruth has led the Berman Institute since its founding back in '96 into becoming the premier bioethics center in America, if not the world, conducting advanced research on areas such as the ethics of clinical practice, biomedical science, and public health, both locally and globally. The Berman Institute, with more now than 35 faculty members across the disciplines of medicine, nursing, public health, genetics, law, philosophy, and social sciences, provides the Hopkins family with a unique platform from which so much good can come for the benefit of everyone all around the world. And all this while the world today is facing so many daunting challenges, not only in the biomedical field, but across all aspects of everyday life. Challenges that more often than not seem to have a common denominator, that of dealing with complex ethical issues, which given the advancement of medical science at large, will only become bigger and more complex. Ruth and her colleagues at the Berman Institute, Jeff, Nancy, Jeremy, Gail, Cinda, and all the members of the Institute's family are ready and committed to indeed help us all deal with very sensitive ethical issues across the board. There is no doubt that the Institute is blessed to be part of the One Hopkins, but so is Hopkins itself to be able to count on the Institute's exceptional intellectual capital, contributing towards establishing Hopkins as the premier overall medical institution in the country and the world. I'm honored to have been a member of the National Advisory Board of the Berman Institute for almost 15 years now. Honored to count everyone at the Institute as a friend, and very grateful to have been blessed in my own personal life to be able to express my gratitude with this personal contribution, which is nothing more than a simple acknowledgement of how far Ruth has taken the Institute and how promising its future is, both within the Hopkins family and within society at large. Furthermore, wearing my Hopkins trustee hat on, I cannot be more proud of the Institute and what it has achieved over the last 15 years. I'm nothing but optimistic about the ability of both the university as one and the Berman Institute to take bioethics at Johns Hopkins to the next level. I just want to thank President Ron Daniels and everyone at the Berman Institute for the opportunity I have had to play a part in this great effort. Thank you.
I have an unanticipated announcement to make. Although I had a wonderful, brilliant set of comments prepared for Ruth's introduction, one capturing her importance to me personally, her visionary realization of this institute, her vision, and her renown within the field of bioethics, I've been instructed by higher powers that this was not to be, that I have been displaced by a mysterious intruder who knows her far better than I. He is a Hopkins graduate, the author of influential works on theory and practice of bioethics, and one of the small cadre of scholars responsible for creating the modern academic field of bioethics. Ruth is one as well. Please join me in welcoming Ruth's husband, Professor Tom Beach.
I do have a few things to say about Ruth. I met Ruth in the summer of 1976 at a conference course at Georgetown University in the very early days of bioethics. She was at the time conversing with a particularly brilliant student of mine, engaged in a discussion that fivefold elevated every lecture and conversation that I heard for the remainder of that week. I was more than a little impressed right from the start. I did not know at the time that Ruth was a 26-year-old, newly minted PhD from Berkeley, with 4 university degrees in 4 very different fields of learning. It would take me years to appreciate what this educational background meant in the formation of her mind and her approach to the acquisition and integration of knowledge. I focus on this early period of Ruth's descent into bioethics in this introduction because it may be the one and the only area of her career in which this audience is not already familiar, and I believe it helps explain much of her later career. When she was about 25 and starting her PhD dissertation, she became fascinated with some issues in bioethics. As is typical of her, she sought out the very best minds that she could find, starting in San Francisco, where she was. The first people she solicited for their knowledge were Al Johnson and David Lewisell. Joan Racklin, who's here somewhere, will appreciate the context. She extracted their wisdom, hungered for more, and so went national, first contacting Jay Katz at the Yale Law School, a man who would emerge as the most important figure in bioethics of his generation. Johnson became her PhD mentor, Katz her mentor in many other respects. When she accepted her appointment at Johns Hopkins, she contacted my director at the Kennedy Institute, Dr. Andre Helligers, whom some of you I'm sure knew. He had just moved from OBGYN at Johns Hopkins to Georgetown to found the Bioethics Institute, the first in a university in the world. Andre, an incredibly savvy academic, was immediately taken with Ruth's talents and made her an offer to be a senior research scholar at Georgetown while maintaining her appointment at Johns Hopkins, the only such offer Andre ever made to a person from another university. Johnson, Lewisell, Katz, and Helligers are all from very different fields of learning, and none of them even in the vicinity of Ruth's doctoral training or her other university degrees. Ruth exhibited at age 26 and has throughout her career exhibited a striking ability, and I mean that, a really striking ability to understand the contributions that derive from many fields of knowledge, to learn from the best minds in those fields, and to integrate and extend what she has learned, turning it into fresh and original work at the frontiers of bioethics. In this kind of interdisciplinary work, she surpasses anyone I have personally ever encountered. And I believe it is a major part of her success as the director of an institute with a deeply diverse faculty and large number of projects. Ruth has described Andreas' endowment in a private conversation with me at the directorship of the Berman Institute as an awesome act of generosity. She feels more than a little overwhelmed by it. She knows, as I do, that this gift will not simply strengthen the Johns Hopkins community. This endowment will keep the Berman Institute in a leadership role in bioethics well into the future and at the international level. Andreas' gift is indeed breathtaking, and I hypothesize that it comes from a belief on his part that this gift is well placed today in the hands of a person of remarkable scholarly and administrative talent, and also a truly charming person. Dr. Ruth Faden.
And you were worried, Andres. Truly, if you can't tell, I didn't know this was coming, and I had Kleenex out before that. So, and I'll do the best I can. It's nice when your husband likes you, isn't it? It's really a good thing. It's really a good thing. So this truly is an extraordinary moment. When I first came to Hopkins many decades ago, there really was no way that I could have envisioned this day. To give you some perspective, I was recruited to Hopkins because of my training in social psychology, not because of my interest in ethics. Indeed, it took me about close to 2 years to convince a curriculum committee to let me teach my first course on ethics and public health. That said, I had fellow travelers right from the beginning, faculty across the university who, like me, were passionate about the promise and the importance of the then very young field of bioethics. One of them, who I'm so sorry isn't here today, I'm going to cry, is John Friedman. Okay, I did it. Sorry about that. I debated whether to say John's name or not. Now you know why. But he was one of the fellow travelers right from the beginning. By the 1990s, we had a really flourishing faculty interest group in bioethics that included colleagues from Homewood, from nursing, from public health, from certainly medicine, as well as, from Homewood, as well as East Baltimore, all the schools I mentioned in East Baltimore, and from the philosophy department at Homewood. We met regularly, kind of on our own dime. We brought lunch, we did seminars for one another. It was really a grassroots, sort of homegrown. We just loved to be together to talk and to think about questions of bioethics. These faculty, some of whom are here today, became the nucleus of the Institute when it was launched in the mid-1990s. But even in the mid-1990s, when the Institute was initiated, I could not have envisioned today. I just could not have envisioned today. We started with big dreams and with big hopes, but the prospect of an endowed directorship, well, that was not even a gleam in the eye. Those big dreams and those big hopes really reduced to one foundational aspiration. We wanted to become one of the best bioethics programs in the world at one of the best universities in the world. And I think we can say, this we have accomplished. Now, I'm regularly asked by people who are taking on leadership positions in bioethics programs at other institutions or who are starting new bioethics programs, exactly how did you do this? Right? How did you pull this off? Well, there are basically, I think, 3 ingredients in our not-so-secret sauce. From the beginning to the present day, we have had extraordinary support, and I mean extraordinary support, from the leadership of this university. The president, the provost, the deans, as well as leaders in development and finance and administration and in legal affairs, all the leadership of this university from the beginning to this day has supported this institute extraordinarily. There is simply no way that a university-wide institute can succeed, let alone flourish, without such support. It's just not possible. So that's our first ingredient. We also have had, from the beginning until today, extraordinary faculty leaders, extraordinary faculty, and an extraordinary staff. We are as mission-driven an organization as you will find anywhere in the academy. We are not only committed to doing first-rate scholarship in bioethics, we are committed to doing scholarship that helps make the world a more ethical place. Now, this is like telling you not to look at the elephant in your room, but please don't look in your brochure that you got, however, look later, is a purple sheet, and that purple sheet lists just a few of the amazing accomplishments and achievements of this faculty. Faculty who have succeeded time and time again in helping to make the world a more ethical place. Whether we work in clinical ethics, in ethics in science, or ethics in public health, this central aim unites us, galvanizes us, and pushes us forward as one academic community. It is really rather staggering how that commitment unites us. And finally, we have had the most extraordinary volunteer leadership and volunteers. This room is filled with people, members of our board and others, whose commitment and support have been absolutely essential to our success. Our volunteer leaders, all of you, are very special people. Although questions of bioethics surround us in our everyday lives, in the news, in global affairs, bioethics as a field is not easy to get. It's an odd combination of intellectual pursuit and the real world. And that is quite kind of unusual, not unique, but unusual. We are so incredibly grateful and lucky that Andreas Dracopoulos gets it. He gets bioethics, its importance in the world, and its place at a great university. Andreas's remarkable gift will allow us to establish new big dreams and new big hopes for the next chapter in the Berman Institute's history. I am convinced that more than ever, ethics is absolutely central to many of the great challenges facing humanity, now and in the future. These challenges do not fall neatly in one bin of the academy or the other. And so frequently, these challenges are completely interdependent. Health, water, food, energy. It will be impossible to solve one in isolation from the other. Take health, for example. The underlying ethical aspiration is to ensure that every individual experiences sufficient health to live a decent life. To achieve that goal will require properly equipped, morally astute clinicians, ethically mediated advances in biomedical science and public health, and just public policies. These issues, these territories, are the current stuff of bioethics. We do a fantastic job in these territories, and we will continue to improve and to lead our field forward. But securing health for all will also require more equitable global trade and intellectual property regimes, and new ways of thinking about corporate responsibility. and it will require fair access to sufficient water and sufficient nutritious food, which will in turn require advances in engineering and the biological sciences, and new thinking in domestic policies, international relations, and global development. The Berman Institute of the next 20 years will need to be structured to respond to these expanded complexities and new interconnected domains. Andreas's incredible gift, and even more importantly, his incredible appreciation of what the future on a global stage requires, has positioned us to make that leap. He has given us a new gleam in the eye, which is in every respect priceless. Allow me to close with the personal. There are so many people in this room that I care about and that I love. I can't begin to name them all. I just hope that you know who you are. I do want to single out my beloved and amazing family, Tom, Zach, Corinne, Martine, you with Anna and Matteo, who, if they came, would completely disrupt this event, being 7 and 8, are the lights of my life. And Tom, who has taught me more than anyone what it means to be a good scholar, a good life partner, a good parent. Tom, you are my rock. I'm glad I put that in there. And I did, and I just didn't know. It's true. He is my rock. I also want to single out one other person, and that is, of course, Andreas. Alex has already evoked Aristotle and the great souled man. Let me evoke yet something else Aristotelian. Aristotle held that without friendship, life would not be worthwhile. In this, as in so many other things, Aristotle was right. Andreas, in addition to being an extraordinary philanthropist and visionary, you are a wonderful friend. Your friendship is one of the things that makes my life worthwhile. And I am eternally grateful for it and to you. Thank you, everyone.
I think you can see the wisdom of Andreas's philanthropy. You may have noticed, either before or during the ceremony, that there are two beautiful blown glass sculptures on the table at the front of the auditorium. These are companion pieces, one each for Ruth and Andreas, commemorating this occasion. I invite you to take a look at them after the ceremony. We have one more piece of business today before we move to the reception. When Andreas made this gift to endow the directorship, he earned a place on the university's Founders Wall. The Stavros Niarchos Foundation, of which Andreas is president, is already listed on the Founders Wall. So this may appear like double dipping, but actually this should stand as an inspiration for all to give through foundations which they are affiliated, as well as individuals. I'm sure Fritz appreciates this portrait. Probably a precedent that more should emulate. So I would like to invite President Daniels back to the podium to share the importance of this milestone.
For his extraordinary support of our mission that spans so many different parts of the university. And indeed, it's really instructive, Andreas, how many different parts of the university are represented here today. And I think that, again, says so much about the breadth of your vision and your generosity. But I'm pleased that to inform you that Andreas's name has recently been added to our Founders Wall, which stands just across the quad from here. Now, those of you who know the story will know well the history of this, that in 1876 our university was founded with a bequest of $7 million from Baltimore philanthropist and business leader Johns Hopkins. And since that time, 140 donors have followed in his footsteps, making equally transformative gifts that have changed our research, advanced our mission, enhanced our education, and enabled us to bring service to the globe. In 2009, the university unveiled the Founders Wall, a monument listing the names of those who have made such a difference to our university and to our world. Chiseled in marble, the names on that wall become part of a lasting and permanent testament to the great benefaction that undergirds all that we do at Johns Hopkins. Both individually and as a leader of the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, Andreas has been, as you have heard, deeply engaged in advancing the mission of discovery and education that lies at the very heart of our university, whether supporting the launch of CTY programs in Greece, advancing our understanding of bioethics, or helping us remain leaders in the horizon of academic medicine in the nation and the world. Each year, we present new members of the Founders Wall with a specially commissioned brass telescope. A merchant banker, Johns Hopkins, used to watch for his ships to come over the horizon to the Baltimore harbor through a similar telescope. But more importantly, in all that he did, he was able to take the long view, looking always towards the future, and launching a revolutionary model of higher education and academic medicine that would serve humanity. Andreas, for your vision and for all that you have made possible for the future of our institution, please accept this token of our appreciation. Yes, thank you again. Thank you all for being here on this truly joyous occasion. I invite you all over to the Founders Wall, and you'll see Andreas' name alongside those who have made an abiding and enduring and eternal impact on our great enterprise. Indeed, it turns out it was serendipitous, but a few weeks ago I was actually crossing the quad, and I actually happened to stumble upon the tradesman who was actually chiseling Andreas' name. The spelling was off. We had but we did get it. It was actually this great, and as I said, very serendipitous moment that gave me a sense of pride in knowing you, and again being able to see a concrete manifestation of the great affection and esteem that this university has for you, and seeing that your name be chiseled in marble at that point in time really left me very, very deeply moved, as I know it did so many of us. So with that, Andreas, thank you. Ruth, thank you. Alex, thank you. Tom, wonderful. Zach, glad you made it here on time. And again, invite all of you to join us for a celebration now, and that we mark this great occasion. Thank you all for being here.